In this video, I'm going to talk about the difference between Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop when it comes to designing wedding invitations. You'll see I have a clear preference, but we'll see what you think. Let's dive in. A lot of beginning designers use whatever program they're comfortable with, and Photoshop feels a little more accessible because I think everyone kind of understands the general concept of photoshopping something. However, it actually has a lot of limitations when it comes to designing wedding invitations. And if you're not using the right tools, you'll eventually hit a wall with the type of printers you can work with, the type of print methods you can use, the type of clients you're going to get, etc. So here I've designed the same invitation in Illustrator, and I've also redesigned it here in Photoshop. And I'm going to talk about the differences between the two, what I like to use Photoshop for, what I prefer to use Illustrator for, and how they can talk to each other. If you're brand new and Illustrator feels really intimidating or you're switching over from using Photoshop, I do have a free class all about how to get set up in Illustrator and start designing wedding invitations. I'll link that in the description for you. So here we are in Illustrator, and as you can see, we have what's called an artboard. That's these different white rectangles here, and each artboard is kind of like a different page. So you could save these out as a 5-page document with each different artboard being a different page. In Illustrator, each artboard can be any size that you want it to be. So as you can see, I have my main invitation is 5x7. The envelopes here are also 5x7. And then the RSVP card and RSVP envelope are 3.5 by 5. You can move these around. You can add new ones. You can delete them. You can align them to each other. For instance, if I select both of these and align them to center, everything on the artboards is going to stay in place, but the whole artboard is going to shift to be aligned. This can be helpful for a lot of different reasons. When you are designing wedding invitations, you typically have a lot of different pages. This is a very minimal suite with just invitation, RSVP card, and corresponding envelopes, but I still need 5 total artboards to show my client all of that information. Over here in Photoshop, I have designed the same invitation. However, you can see that there's only one artboard or document per Photoshop file. You can work in different layers, but your overall canvas is always going to be the same size. You can't make this canvas different sizes for different layers. So if you do want to do wedding invitations here, you're going to have a different file for each piece of the invitation suite. So all 5 of these artboards here, you're gonna have 5 different files. So that's going to be a big game changer for me, as I like to see everything for the full suite. It helps me get colors balanced, make sure that fonts are similar sizes and everything across all the different pieces, and helps me ensure that I've got everything that the client needs. When you're moving things around, for instance, if I didn't know if I wanted this bird to be on either piece, it's so much easier to do that when you can see everything versus if you're working between different documents. Also, things like undo, redo are just going to be so much easier if you're working all on one document as opposed to 5 different ones. Another difference is that Illustrator is built for vector graphics, whereas Photoshop is built for what's called raster or bitmap graphics. Raster graphics are probably what you think of when you think of images. So if you zoom in really far, you're going to start to see those pixels, because in a raster image, everything is in pixels. It's in squares in a grid. This is really great for watercolor images, paintings, photos, etc., because you can shift between colors really, really naturally if you're doing it by pixels. On the other hand, in Illustrator, you're going to have what's called a vector graphic, and a vector is basically using math to create shapes. I'm going to create this little circle here. And as you can see, the circle has 4 points on it, and then they have these vector dimensions that are telling them what angle to connect to the next point. So it's connecting from here to here to here to here and back to here to close out that circle. And what this allows you to do is scale your circle up or down as much as possible, and because math is creating the shape, you're always going to have exactly the same shape, whether you're putting this on a billboard or a tiny little button or something. So this is a benefit of vector graphics, whereas if we zoom in even just a little bit to this watercolor graphic, it does start to appear a little bit pixelated because all of those colors are just in pixels. I have a further video on this if you want to dive further into it. But when it comes to print design, oftentimes we need vector graphics. For instance, if you're doing letterpress or foil printing, then you need all of your files to be in vector, and you just can't do that in Adobe Photoshop. But you can do that in Adobe Illustrator because it's a vector graphics editing program. Even if you don't do a lot of vector style graphics and you use raster style graphics like these watercolor images, then you're still working with text when it comes to wedding invitations, and text is always a vector. So right now this text is editable. I can change the names, I can change the color, the font, etc. But before I send it to print, I'm always going to do what's called creating outlines. And that basically settles the text into its vector format. You can see all of those nice anchor points here, and then the math that is connecting them to the others. Because Illustrator is made to handle vector graphics, you're able to make changes to them, edit them, fill them in different ways, just do a lot of things with vector graphics and specifically text that you can't do in Photoshop. As an example with this circle, I'm just gonna grab this anchor point and move it to create a wonky shape. You also could just delete this anchor point if you wanted to have a different shape. You can change these from curves to corners. You can edit the corners to make them curves. There's a lot of things you can do this shape without losing the ability to change its color, to scale it up and down, etc. In Photoshop, you do have some of those capabilities. I have this circle here, and then I am able to edit the points a little bit by turning it into a regular path from a live shape. However, you don't have some of the abilities like getting rid of this anchor point while still keeping the path closed. If I delete this anchor point, then the path is now open. You also don't have the editing capabilities of curves and corners that I showed you in Illustrator, and this only is going to work on certain live shape elements. There's not a point where you'll be able to edit any of the text by vector points. So if you wanted to change some of this font a little bit, create a cool monogram, etc., you're just not going to have some of those capabilities. So personally, I find working with text to be really difficult in Photoshop, and I think once you start using Illustrator, you will also realize that there's so many additional capabilities there. Before you print any invites, you have to outline your text, and in Photoshop, that means rasterizing it, which is converting it into pixel bitmap raster format, so just a collection of squares on the page. When you outline your text in Illustrator, it's converting it to anchor points, which are in vector format. So you'll still have the capability there to edit the text a lot more. It's going to be a lot crisper, especially if you're using a really high quality printer. And you will have the ability to then kind of use that and scale it up in the future or down if you need to, or do a lot more things with it. So vector format is just going to be a lot more flexible for you, especially when it comes to text. I think it's obvious that I prefer Adobe Illustrator over Photoshop for creating wedding invitations. The main reasons for me are that you can see everything on screen, move everything around together, and that Illustrator is just a vector editing program. So it's much better with vector shapes as well as text. You will see, however, that I do have some watercolor elements on this invitation as well, and those are raster, not vector. So for this reason, I really love using Adobe in general because I can use the right program for different tasks and still bring everything together in the place that I need it. So I've established Illustrator is the place that I like to design everything and keep everything together. But if I need to edit these raster graphics individually, I'm still going to use Photoshop for that. So for instance, I'm going to look at this pink bird that I have here on the invitation, and what if they didn't want it to be pink, but they wanted it to be blue or orange or something else? You can see that I have basically placed this file here, and you'll do that by going into File and Place. So this file is not vectorized. It's not perfect for Illustrator, but I'm basically using it in Illustrator. If I wanted to edit it individually, there's not much I can do here in Illustrator. As you can see, the only points are on the edges of the square. There's not all of those anchor points like we saw on the circle or the text after we vectorized it. So if I wanted to edit this, the best place to do that is in Photoshop. And as you can see, there's a button right here that says Edit in Photoshop. Whenever you have a raster element in Illustrator, it'll give you that option to edit it in Photoshop. And when you click that, it will open up the original file here in Photoshop. You can see I have turned down the opacity, I've changed the direction of the bird, and I've also angled him a little bit. But this is the original file that we have. So we wanted to change the pink to a different color. We could do something like use an adjustment layer for hue and saturation. This is my favorite way to edit the colors of watercolor. So we'll select the reds because we mostly just want to change these pink elements. And this is kind of like filtering certain parts of the image. So we'll change, let's see, what's a good color to use? With watercolor, you don't want to go too crazy. If I go all the way over here, this doesn't look realistic anymore. But something like turning it from pink to a little bit more purple is definitely doable. And especially something like adjusting the saturation. Maybe it's too bright and we want to make it a little bit dustier and a little bit lighter. So let's see what the difference is. This is the original artwork. It was kind of pink. And this is the new artwork that is purple. So in Illustrator, because I've placed this pink bird, all I have to do is actually save that file in Photoshop. I'm going to click Save. And then when I return to Illustrator, it's going to say some files are missing or modified, and would you like to update them? So if I click yes, it's going to update that pink bird to our new lighter, more purple bird. This is how the Adobe programs talk to each other, and this means you can use Photoshop for the things that it is really good at and use Illustrator for the things that it is really good at without missing out on the capabilities of either. So for Illustrator, I like seeing all of the artboards and the pieces of the suite, putting everything together. I like working with text better here, and I like working with any vector graphic shapes. In Photoshop, I like to pretty much edit watercolors. That's almost exclusively what I use Photoshop for when it comes to wedding invitations. I also use it for editing photos and paintings as well, but generally that's going to be our watercolor elements. So I'm always a huge fan of using the tool for what it's designed to do, and Photoshop is designed to edit raster elements. That's the #1 purpose, and Illustrator is designed to edit vector elements, and that's its #1 purpose. So I love it for the main part of designing wedding invitations, but then when I do have watercolor or painted elements, I'm going to edit those in Photoshop and bring them in here. So I hope this helped you understand why you might want to use Illustrator versus Photoshop for designing wedding invitations and what parts of the process should be in which program. I'm going to have another video about Illustrator versus InDesign. These are two much more similar programs, and a lot of people like to use both of them for the same things when it comes to wedding invitation design. So really excited to check that out. I do have that free class on using Adobe Illustrator that is taught just for stationery designers. If you want to get started and learn how to use this program, it's so much more powerful. If you've been using Adobe Photoshop for so long, I think you're going to love it. Plus, I have a ton more tutorials here, so if you're not sure how to do something, feel free to let me know or check out my other Adobe playlists. Thanks, everyone.